All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome. So glad to have you guys here. Today's going to be really beneficial for anybody who is feeling like the process of getting your anxiety under control is feeling very complicated, and you're looking for some simple ways to just make the whole process a whole lot simpler. Today's session is really also going to be very effective for anybody who is a little unsure if they can even live a life without anxiety. If you've been feeling like it's just way too difficult and you're really even just unsure if it's even possible for you, I really think you're going to want to stick through to this one, because what I'm going to share with you has been something that when I've shared it with clients in the past, it really illuminates things. It really gives people a lot of hope, and it gives people a lot of direction. And really what we're going to be doing is taking this whole process of getting over anxiety, really reducing it dramatically, and then ideally even eliminating it. And we're going to make it a whole lot more simple. And really we're going to look at it from a different angle and boil it down to really just kind of two big things that you need to change. And if you isolate what these two things are and you learn what they are and you learn how to change them, which is going to be fairly simple, it's not going to be necessarily easy. I want to be very upfront about that. It's kind of like losing weight, right? To lose weight, you need to exercise and eat right. But it's simple. It's relatively simple for most people. And in the same way, people make overcoming anxiety way more complicated than it is. And I want to simplify things for you. So if you guys are excited to hear that, and if you can see me, if you can hear me, can you go ahead and put yes in the comments, please? I see we got people joining us live, jumping right in. For those of you who are new to our community, my name is Ty Hicks, founder of mentalhealthcoaching.com and the anxiety eliminating brain retraining method. And we put this content out there because I really believe that nobody should have to live with anxiety or depression. And I really believe in my bones that nobody has to if they learn the right brain retraining skills. And that's why we put this content out there for you guys. Okay. So go ahead, put something in the comments. Let me know where you guys are joining in from. And I'm very excited to be diving in with you guys. So here's kind of what I want to unpack for you. Really what I want you to think of is I want you to bring your awareness to what types of anxious thoughts you have on a regular day. And for most people, they tend to have the same types of anxious thoughts every single day. There might be slight variations from time to time. For example, if somebody's dealing with health anxiety, one day they might worry they're having a heart attack. Another day they might worry that they are having an allergic reaction, for example. Somebody who's got social anxiety, one day they might be worried about getting, stuck in traffic. Another day they might be worried about being in a public venue and not being able to get home. Okay, so there might be slight variations, but you'll notice that there's a similar pattern with your particular type of anxiety. And for those of you guys joining live, can you let me know in the comments, what is kind of the dominant pattern? What kind of thoughts do you tend to have on a regular daily basis? Is it a fear of something bad happening with your health? Is it a fear of something bad happening to people you love? Is it literally getting anxious about getting anxious? You are anticipating having an anxiety attack of some kind, for example. What is it that is the problem? Okay. That's the first big thing. And I want you to bring your awareness to that. And I want you to bring your awareness to the fact that your mind tends to have very, very similar, if not completely the same thoughts day in and day out. And there have been studies that have verified this, that the human brain has about 80 to 100,000 thoughts a day, but that about 80 to 90% of those thoughts are the same, whether those are positive or negative thoughts. So what that means is that your nervous system has become conditioned, keyword conditioned. And that's why the solution to getting rid of anxious thoughts is, surprise, surprise, conditioning. You didn't come out of the womb with conditioned automatic negative thoughts, contrary to popular belief. This has been debunked many, many times. Anxiety is not predominantly a genetic issue. It is not something you're born with. It is something that you develop over a period of time. Sometimes it's sudden, like after a car wreck or something like that, but no one comes out of the womb with anxiety attacks. It just doesn't occur. Okay, so the thing that you want to understand is that your brain is developing an automatic series of patterns. To get rid of the anxiety, all we have to do, the only singular thing we have to do, is we have to get your brain to have automatic positive thoughts as opposed to automatic negative thoughts. Does that make sense to you? If the problem with anxiety is that your brain is spitting out automatic negative thoughts by default each and every day. It would make sense that to eliminate the anxiety, all we got to do is train the brain to have automatic positive thoughts. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, go ahead and let me know in the comments, please. Greatly appreciate it. Okay? So, to eliminate something, to get rid of something, to get rid of the automatic negative thoughts, what I believe we have to do is we have to understand where are they coming from. Because otherwise what you're doing is you're basically using coping mechanisms, which a lot of people do, and this is what traditional therapy teaches. And this is a big reason why I chose not to be a therapist, is because coping can only take you so far. If you use something like meditation, if you use something like journaling, if you use something like the process of talk therapy, kind of getting things off your chest, if you use adult coloring books or whatever, you can temporarily slow down or, sort of minimize those anxious thoughts from popping up in that moment. But you're going to have a really tough time in the long term because those thoughts are going to be popping up automatically. Again, the following day or the day after that or the week after that, it's just going to continue to be a big issue for you. And we don't want that to occur, right? So what we really have to do if we want to fix the issue is we have to get to the source of the anxious thoughts. We have to get to where things are actually occurring in the first place. And the good news is there's only two types of anxious thoughts, and there's really only two sources of where they come from, contrary to popular belief. And I'm going to be sharing those with you today. And so the first type of anxious thought that the first type of, let's call it the first source of anxious thoughts. Okay, let's put it that way. The first source of anxious thoughts comes from overvaluing certainty. Okay, go ahead and put that in the chat in the comments, please. Write that down. Remember that. It comes from overvaluing certainty. It comes from overvaluing what, folks? Certainty. Okay, now what does that mean? What that means is that for many of you, what has occurred is you have gotten yourself to a point where you've come to believe that you must have a higher level of certainty than you can actually obtain in a particular area of your life. So if we look at health anxiety, for example, health anxiety occurs when somebody has convinced themselves that they must be, okay, key emphasis on must, they must be 100% certain that they are not ill and that they will not become ill in the future. They need to be 100% certain that every sensation in their body can be accounted for. They need to be 100% certain that every single thing that they feel is not a symptom of a medical issue. The challenge, of course, is that until we all get the 100th version of Elon Musk's Neuralink implanted in our brain, and we have, our phone is linked up with our nervous system, and we can have a total feedback loop of knowing exactly what's going on in us at all times, we're not going to have total certainty that every little sensation in our body can be accounted for. We're not going to be able to have 100% total certainty that we are not having a health issue. And so the health anxiety occurs for people when they all of a sudden believe that they must be 100% certain. In other words, they have overvalued certainty. Now, what do I mean by overvalued? What I mean by overvalued is every human being requires a certain amount of certainty. Okay? So for example, if you're listening to this recording or watching the video or being here on the live stream, that's great. If all of a sudden there was an earthquake going on in your house right now, the last thing you're going to care about is what I have to say, right? You're going to get yourself in a doorway, or you're going to find your family, you're going to find safety, right? Whatever you can do to find safety. Because every human being, we have a survival mechanism basically hardwired in us to get certainty, okay? The challenge occurs, however, when we start to overvalue the certainty. Basically, when we convince ourselves that we must have a amount of certainty that we cannot actually obtain in our daily life. And this is what causes anxiety. I have said, and I've gone on record before, saying that anxiety is nothing more, and hear me really, really clearly right now, because if you really hear me right now, you're going to understand your mental health in a totally different way. Anxiety is nothing more than your brain grasping for something that it believes it has to have and being unable to reach it. Anxiety is nothing more than your brain grasping for something that it believes it has to have and being unable to reach it. And there's a lot of different variations of this. Grasping for, I need to be totally sure and certain that every sensation in my body is not cancerous. Or grasping and reaching for, I need to be totally sure that everyone at school or at work likes me and approves of all of my opinions. Or grasping and reaching for, I need to achieve things constantly or else I'm not going to be good enough. Or grasping and reaching for, I got to take care of everybody's problems. And if I don't take care of everybody's problems and anyone around me is upset, then I'm not good enough. Okay? So anxiety comes when we've created a belief that there is something we must have that we cannot have. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay? If it does make sense, then here's what the antidote to anxiety is. This is how we deal with anxiety at the source, not just at the symptom level. This is how you go from just coping with it to actually getting rid of it. The only way to get rid of the anxiety, if it's certainty created, is you must adopt a belief system. You must reinforce and condition a belief system. You must rewire your brain to know in your bones, to feel and know that the truth is you don't need to be certain in order to live your life. And this is a literal like incantation or mantra, whatever word you want to use, that I will give my clients very often. I just used it a couple hours ago with a woman who's dealing with anxiety pertaining to relationships. And basically, as soon as there becomes a certain level of depth and intimacy, she starts freaking out. Her brain starts generating all these thoughts of, well, what's going to happen? What if I leave him? What if he leaves me? What if we get really close and then one of us dies? Blah, 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 blah. And what she's craving, her brain is craving a higher amount of certainty than she can get. So the mantra that she is ingraining into her brain amongst a bunch of other tools that we're using with her is, I don't have to be 100% certain in order to live my life. And I would please put that in the comments. Put that down in your notes somewhere. I don't need to be 100% certain in order to live my life. Can you see how liberating that would be? Could you see how absolutely freeing adopting a belief system like that would be? To basically create the mindset of, I am totally comfortable in uncertain situations. I can handle uncertain situations. I've been in uncertain situations plenty of times before. I'm going to be able to be just fine. I'll be able to get through this, no problem. When you adopt a belief system that says, I don't have to be certain, ironically, it creates a huge amount of certainty. Because certainty is what we call a paradoxical value. Okay, paradoxical value, meaning the more you try to be certain, the less certain you feel. Can any of you guys relate to that? The more you try to feel certain, the less certain you feel. Right? So ironically, the less you try to feel certain, the more certain you do feel. And that's why certainty, overvaluing certainty, is the first of two sources of anxious thoughts that we have to deal with. We have to get rid of. Okay, it's one of two, and there's only two. All right, so that's the first big one. So here's kind of the metaphor that I want you to keep in mind. And this whole lesson, the inspiration for today's lesson, by the way, was a couple days ago. I had a client coming to me, and they were like, Ty, I have all these different anxious thoughts. How do I eliminate all of these different anxious thoughts? And they were focused on like dozens of anxious thoughts that they had identified that they were having on a repeat basis. And I said, look, you don't need to worry about these 30 some odd anxious thoughts. What we really need to do is we need to not focus on the branches of the tree. We need to focus on the trunk of the tree. Okay, so think of it this way, right? Like if you had a tree that was in the way, let's say it like you needed to, put a driveway somewhere and you had a tree that was in the way. What do you think is the more effective way to get rid of the tree? To try to clip every single tiny twig and branch one by one and work your way down to the trunk? Or should we just go after the trunk, theoretically, so long as it's safe to do it? Shouldn't we just like make one cut instead of 1,000 cuts? You get what I'm saying? The real source of the problem is not all of the little twigs and the branches. The source of the problem is the trunk of the tree. And in a very similar way, I'll just stick with the example of health anxiety, but it doesn't really matter. If you've got anxiety pertaining to certainty, right? Like if your brain is going, oh my gosh, what was that twitch in my arm? What was that tiny little tingle I felt in my hand? What was that little ache that I felt in my knee? What was that little shortness of breath I just felt, right? We don't need to worry about every single one of those tiny thoughts. What we need to worry about is the fact that you are obsessed with trying to be totally certain about your health. The core belief that's the problem is I must be totally certain about my health or else I cannot function in my daily life. It's that core belief that is giving birth to a multitude, an infinity of different anxious thoughts. So if we retrace the branch of the tree down to the trunk, now we can just deal with the core belief. This is what I mean by dealing with the anxiety at the source. This is what no one ever teaches you in talk therapy. This is what I never got taught in talk therapy. I had to figure it out on my own. And that's why we're able to not only dramatically chop down the level of anxiety that somebody has in a very short period of time doing it this way, but theoretically even eliminate it in many cases. Because if we really get rid of that trunk, now that's it. The tree is dead. It's over. It's gone, right? That's it. If we deal with the core belief that says I have to be totally certain in order to function, and we flip that and change that into I don't have to be certain in order to live my life and to function, game over. The anxiety is gone. Now, that is one of two main sources of anxiety. So let's go ahead and move on to the second one, because some of you might be thinking, well, Ty, I think that does pertain to me, but I think that there's another type of anxious thought that I might have too, and you could be very well correct. So let's go ahead and talk through it real quick, and we'll see if the second one is the issue for you. So the second one that might be the issue for you is you might be dealing with an issue with what we call significance. Okay, significance. Now, when I say significance, what I'm really talking about here is I'm talking about the desire to feel good enough. That's really what we mean, the desire to feel good enough. So there's lots of different variations of this, but the one type of anxiety that people have is they want to feel certain about things. The second type of anxiety that people will have is they want to feel that they are good enough and worthy of love. Okay, if you guys can relate to that, if that sounds like you, can you go ahead and let me know in the comments, please? Now, there's different variations of this core belief. There are 7, in fact. I'm not going to cover every single one of them, but the common ones are I need to be an achiever, right? I need to achieve things in order to be good enough. A second one is I need to be a perfectionist. I can't make any flaws or mistakes, or else I'm not good enough. Number 3 would be I need to be a pleaser, a people pleaser. I got to please everybody all the time, or else I'm not good enough. Another one that's coming to my mind right now is what we call the caretaker, which is I got to take care of everybody else's problems, and if anyone has a problem and I don't take care of it, then I'm not good enough. Okay, and so people will, as you could imagine, with any 4 of these things, there's 7 in fact, but with any one of these things, people will then have a multitude of anxious thoughts. So for example, if my core belief is I have to take care of everybody's problems or else I am not good enough, if that's my core belief, could you see how that trunk of the tree is then going to give birth to lots and lots of different branches? That's then going to create a lot of different random, negative, automatic thoughts depending on how many people there are in my life and how big of problems they have. There's a particular client coming to my mind I worked with last year. She had a big family, lots of siblings. She was not even the oldest child, but she had always kind of taken on this role of being like the caretaker. And so anytime her brother or her sister were having a disagreement with each other, she would get in the middle of it, even though it wasn't even her problem. But she had this belief of, I have to solve every person's problem in my family or else I'm not good enough. So that's anxiety inducing. Because remember what I said, anxiety is nothing more than your brain grasping for something it believes it has to have and then failing to grasp it. So if I believe I have to take care of everybody else's problems or I'm not good enough, what is the likelihood that I'm going to be able to take care of everybody's problems in my life, all of my friends and my family members? What is the likelihood, guys, that we're going to be able to do this? Basically 0. It's just not going to happen. And so that's what creates anxiety. If I create a belief that says I have to be achieving things all the time or else I'm not good enough, well, I'm going to be grasping for those achievements. And sometimes I'll achieve things and I'll feel good for a second, but then I'm going to come up with the next achievement that I think I have to grasp for. And then I'm going to go towards that and move towards it. And then I'm going to feel upset when I'm not achieving things. Same thing with pleasing people. What's the likelihood that you're going to be able to please everybody all the time? It's just not going to happen. So these are all just core variations of the belief of I am not good enough unless I X, Y, Z. Okay? And so what we have to shift from is that belief where your self-worth and your self-love is very conditional into a belief that says I am enough just because I exist. When you adopt a belief that says my love for myself is unconditional, I refuse to withhold love from myself, I refuse to indulge a narrative or a story where I tell myself that I'm not good enough unless I achieve certain preconditions, that eliminates anxiety. That's what eliminates anxiety, guys, is you adopting and conditioning that new way of looking at the world. And anybody can tap into that. You might think, oh, yeah, well, that's not going to be possible because I grew up with my dad, and my dad, he just always harped on me achieving things, and it was just never good enough for my mom. She found a flaw in everything, and I've always been a perfectionist. Well, bullshit. It's not that you are a perfectionist, which, by the way, there's no such thing as a perfectionist. There's only procrastinators that are playing the part. We use the belief of I am a perfectionist as a justification to avoid taking action because we are scared. Okay, I've done it many times, but no, you're not a perfectionist. You're just a procrastinator. Okay, and the thing is, how you have been is not indicative of how you can be. And this is one of the big mistakes that people make is they talk about their patterns of the past and they create language where they bring ownership of their patterns of the past into the present. So when someone says, I am a perfectionist, I'll say, bullshit. You have been pretending to be a perfectionist up until now, but no longer. Those words up until now are very, very liberating. If you can just put those in front of whatever pattern it is that you want to get rid of. Up until now, I have procrastinated on this. Up until now, I have obsessed over achieving things. Up until now, I have required having a lot of certainty before I do things. You want to use that because what a lot of times people do when they hear me explain this stuff is they go, oh my gosh, Ty, that's exactly me. That's exactly what I do. I have to be totally certain before I do things. And I'll say false, not true. Up until now, you have believed that you needed to be totally certain of things before you did things. It is not true that you must be totally certain of things before you do them. So don't speak that over yourself. Because the more you say that you have that problem, the more that problem will continue to live and breathe in the present, and it will be a problem for you. Everything starts with changing your language. The language that you use becomes the life that you live. So if you want to change the life you live, you must change the language that you use. Okay. So anyway, let's bring this all up to a summary point. All right. All anxious thoughts stem from these two sources. And I was working with a client earlier today, and I told her, I was retracing her steps because she was feeling so overwhelmed with all these anxious thoughts. And I pointed out to her, look, these are your only two problems. You're overvaluing certainty, and you're convincing yourself that you're not good enough unless you meet certain preconditions and requirements. And we got to get rid of those beliefs, and we got to replace them with the ones I just described a few minutes ago we need to replace them with. And she got it. She really understood it. And what I realized is, I told her this. I said, look, out of all the 600 plus clients that I've helped over the past 7 years eliminate their anxiety or dramatically reduce it, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, all anxious thoughts can be traced back to one of these two problems. It's like all rivers can be traced back to the ocean. I actually don't know if that's true, but it seems to make sense in my head. But you get my point. It's just like all branches can get traced back to the trunk of the tree, right? Like it all comes back to those two core things. It all comes back to those two core beliefs. And that means that all types of anxiety are only emanated from one of two delusions that we create in our brain, one of two assumptions. Okay. And when I say delusions, I don't mean that offensively. I'm not saying you're delusional. I'm saying we all create delusions. We all have distortions of reality that we adopt and we believe that are not necessarily true. And so our job is to wake ourselves up from those delusions. And the two delusions, let me repeat them for you again one more time, is number one, I have to be certain of things that I cannot be certain of, or else I cannot function and live my life. That's number one. The second one is, I am not currently good enough, and the only way I will be good enough and worthy of love is if I do something that is impossible for me to do consistently. Okay, whether it be achieving things, perfecting things, etc. That's it. That's where all sources of anxiety come from. It's always one of those two things. So if you create that belief shift into the alternatives that I've shared, you will be able to get rid of your anxiety. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, it's simple, not necessarily easy, right? Kind of like losing weight, right? Losing weight boils down to just a couple simple principles, right? Now, do we need to customize things a little bit for each person? Do some people need accountability? Do some people really need to hire a personal trainer to have the accountability and to have the guidance because it's too overwhelming for them to figure it out on their own? Yes, absolutely. And that's why it's okay to lean on other people and get help from time to time, right? You need to be comfortable doing that. It's okay. But it's pretty damn simple. If you want to get rid of anxiety, we've got to eliminate those two core belief systems. Or for you, it may be one or the other. For many people, it's both. For a lot of you, it's just one of those two. So if we can identify it, we know what we need to replace it with. All that's missing in the middle there is the rewiring process, the reconditioning process. Okay? And that's it. It all just boils down to that. So hope this has been helpful and provide value for you guys. We are about to close up enrollment for November clients. We only have a couple slots left. If you are looking to get your anxiety handled and you'd like some individual help and you want to apply, see if you meet our criteria and if it's a good fit, go ahead. If you're joining us live in the comments, go ahead and put the word apply. We'll reach out to you, schedule a very quick call, see if our program is a good fit for you. If you are selected, I would be working with you directly one-on-one to help you eliminate your anxiety or at least reduce it by 75%. And if you don't feel satisfied you've reduced it by at least 75% in 90 days, I continue to work with you one-on-one for free until you do. So if that sounds interesting and appealing and you're really ready to rip the Band-Aid off, go ahead and put apply in the comments. You must be someone with what we call severe anxiety, where it's at least a 6.5 out of 10 consistently or regularly. You must also be the type of person where you are much more interested in implementing the skills and the practices and the structures that work. You're not just interested in just talking about this over and over again. If that's what you're interested in, go see a therapist. If what you are interested in, however, is transformation and really ripping the Band-Aid off, then that's great. You also must either be a working salaried professional or married to a working salaried professional. Okay, those are the requirements. But if that sounds like you and you want to get this done and you want to make sure 2025 is your anxiety-free year, go ahead and put apply in the comments. If you're joining us on YouTube or our podcast afterwards, go ahead and go to mentalhealthcoaching.com and you can submit an application there. But thanks, guys, for joining with us, and I will see you next week. Take care for now. Bye.